This work session to order. The agenda item we have under discussion by mayor and council members. Randy, I'm going to let you handle the particulars on this and induce Alcorn et al.
So basically free-form work session. Of course, council's feel free to speak when you see fit. We do have the Alcorns here, property owners of large number of properties downtown, and they do have a presentation for it. So we've got Ray and Rick and Jared Alcorn.
Okay.
And we also have several other people with interest in downtown here too. So
Interested parties, that's good. Dave.
I'll just turn it over to the Alcorns for now if they'd like.
Okay.
All right.
Well, Mayor, I know now that when you say you're going to pull the trigger, you pull the trigger. We happened to have a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and you said, let's have a work session. And I said, okay. And I had no idea. We found out about this Monday, and then we found out yesterday that we were the only thing on the agenda. This is as close as I can come to winging it. I put together a PowerPoint for you that's got some basically big picture information with it. I do have some stats and some demographics and things like that. But we thought we'd just kind of walk you through a little bit of our background and why we're in downtown Christiansburg and how it's transpired over the years. We are Park Commercial Real Estate. The firm was founded. Do I have to point this at that, or is it? Okay, good. Founded in '56 by my father. Rick Alcorn, my brother, is partner here. Jared Alcorn, my son. There's two more, Ron and Randy, that are not here tonight. Our business model is nepotism. It works. We always inspire each other, and we know how to hide from each other. We have been in the commercial real estate development business for about 30 years, and for over that period of time, we have dealt across 3 states. We have properties in Roanoke, Salem, Montgomery County, Christiansburg, Blacksburg. We're focusing tonight only on Christiansburg downtown, and this is something that we started into some time ago, and it goes back actually to 2006. We were looking at the boom that was going on at the time in real estate, and we had built a bunch of retail properties, and we felt like it was coming to a peak. We didn't know when, but we thought we need to be looking at some other places and selling some stuff and reinvesting. So we surveyed a lot of markets. Downtown Christiansburg, of course, is right in our backyard. Although I'm from Blacksburg, I lived in Christiansburg from 1988 to 2009, and so I consider it home. I consider the whole county home. But as we looked at these different markets, Christiansburg, even though at that time, and all of you will remember, downtown was a ghost town. It was 50% plus vacant. Rents were very low. And so we thought there may be opportunity there. And we worked very closely with Lance Turpenny on some other things out on the other end of town, in the marketplace area, in those. And at that time, the Main Street project was coming along. We knew the courthouse was going to be built. We knew something was going to happen to the old courthouse, not real sure when back then, what back then. But we also knew there was an extensive concentration of government and finance and healthcare facilities in downtown. And that was the core group that was in downtown at the time. And as we looked at a timeline going out, we felt that can't help but grow because of these developments. So we made a decision to start acquiring property. The first one we acquired was the BB&T Insurance Building from Sam Nixon. The picture on the left there is when we bought it. That's what it looks like now. It now houses Mountain View Humane, New River Valley Disability Resource Center. Then later that year, we acquired 49 West Main. That's what it looked like when we bought it. That's what it looks like today. On the right, it's home to Hard Part Barbershop, and I encourage everybody to go see Jacob and get a haircut. I need one. I'll be down there. In 2008, we bought what we now call Town Square, and it was a former FNB operations center before this use. You can't see it, but that's got a store closing sale right there in that window. And the building was about 60% vacant, or a little bit more than that, and had some problems. We made a decision to renovate that building, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And that's what it looks like today. Morgan Griffith's office is there, right there. And we have several other tenants in the building. That is actually the only building we have any vacancy in. In 2009, we acquired the Medical Arts Building and the Advanced Home Care retail front and Children's Insurance right there. And that building was in great shape, but had been poorly managed. It was about 35% vacant at the time. And we felt like that it needed to be updated. It was built in the early 90s, and it was very well built. And we knew that, and so that was the attraction for us for that property. That property today is 100% full. We have medical offices in the Hickok building there, and Advance has just signed a lease renewal for their space. So we're very pleased with that. We've done a lot of interior improvements that don't show up on the street, but we had to update all these buildings to bring them up to speed to code, to new ADA requirements, all of the technology requirements. So all of these buildings had required a tremendous amount of work. 2011, we bought the old medicine shop, is what people refer to it as, although my brother Randy worked in this building as a banker for FNEB back in the 80s. I walked into our office with the floor plan of the building, had no identification of where it was, and I just laid the floor plan down on his desk. I said, "What do you think?" And he looked at it for a minute, and he stuck his finger, and he said, "My desk was right there." So, today, the county leases that building for us, from us, the magistrate's office in there, and real estate assessor's office. 2014, we acquired 8 Radford Street. That's the J. Howe Smith building. That's another building that was, of course, that going back to the medicine shop building, it was 100% vacant when we bought it. This one was 60% vacant when we bought it. It had been through a series of out-of-town owners. I chased this building for 3 years, literally, and I went through 2 owners until I finally found one that would, I guess the pain level probably got high enough that he was ready to get out. But that building is now 100% occupied. There are 3 state agencies in there and a medical clinic. So that brings us to where we are today. We have about 60,000 square feet of space. We're 92% occupied, and that's increasing. And it's a variety of retailers, office tenants. We have done a lot of work over the years in working in downtown to try to track usage, demographics, who's here, what type of markets do we have, what do we need to be building, what do we need to be targeting our product to. Our database shows about 550,000 square feet of commercial space. This excludes government buildings. 62% of it is non-owner occupied. The estimated occupancy of this is a really squishy number because we're continually trying to update, but it's about 85%, somewhere between 80 and 85%. And in the same 10 years that we've been doing this, I don't want to leave the impression we're the only one doing anything downtown. There's been over $100 million spent downtown. Part of that town of Christiansburg, this building, I can't remember the year it opened, it was early 2000s if I remember right. And of course the courthouse and the public safety building now is open. Yes, Steve?
since you're talking about that too, I'm not sure if you know about it or not, or, at one time McAdoo's was talking about building some apartments on the second floor as a training area or something like
Of
that.
the Cromer building, yes.
Yeah, are you familiar with that, and has that gone, I haven't seen anything that's happened, has it?
I don't have firsthand knowledge of exactly where they are in their development stage. Staff might be able to help with that, somebody out of the building department. I know that they have done some, what we call, the gutted part of it. So I don't know the exact.
So it is
status.
still somewhat alive?
As far as I know.
Okay.
They had worked on it, I can
Please
add a
do.
little bit, but they had worked on the apartments. I'm not sure if they finalized those out or not. They're still working on the lower level, which is being built out as offices. So if you were to walk by today, you could see the layout of the offices from Main Street. I don't have a schedule on that. I can find out as far as when they're looking to complete the first floor and second floor.
I mean, are there still somewhat apartments?
So the apartments are, yeah, the upstairs was built out as apartments, is my understanding. My understanding is that they were built out as living units for manager trainees.
That was my understanding, and in fact, I listed that. And also, Bob Pops here, and yes, Bob, I got your name right. The Antiques on Main building, I think we did the building seminar over there not too long ago. He gave us a tour all the way through, and I'm really happy to see that building back in use. And then Main Street Baptist Church, of course, you're all familiar with. That's going to add, I have 90 students here. I've also heard 120. I don't know what the number is, but whatever it is, it's more downtown population. And that, as you're going to see in a minute, is an important factor. The demographics for downtown, and this is I'm just kind of pulling out the highlights. Lists, and these were updated literally this morning because, like I said, I found out yesterday that we were the only thing on the agenda, and I said, oh my word, I've got to get current figures because my figures were a couple of years old, and I didn't want to tell you wrong. So it's actually, since the last time I pulled the demographics, the establishment number has increased by about 50. And I can tell you that right now, the 599 is actually 601 because Jared has signed 2 leases in the last 30 days in the Town Square building of businesses that were not previously downtown. Total employment, and this is all 1 mile ring, and that's real important. When you're dealing with downtowns, of course, we've got a major retail center out in the mall area. We've got a developed commercial strip out Roanoke Street. Drive time and convenience become a very big factor for downtown properties. We've worked in downtown Salem, downtown Roanoke, downtown Blacksburg, and this is something that's just typical for downtowns. 159 commercial trade, that includes retailers, service businesses, that type thing. 199 offices, and that's actually the number that let's see, we'll go to 160 commercial trade. One of those is retail and one of those is office. So that's now 160 and 200. Total employment is the big deal. That number is a real factor in determining daytime population. Daytime population is important to every retailer, every service business, and in many factors, even in office tenants. It takes a concentration of daytime population in order to attract those retailers and service businesses that really start to feed into a vibrant downtown that doesn't shut down at 5 o'clock. And that will lead to some downtown housing, which we'll talk about in a minute. That number, 4858, I believe is low. I do not believe they have picked up the employees that relocated to the public safety building. There's, I think, 280 or so people in that building. So that number, I round it to 5,000 and feel comfortable with that. 1,200 of them are public administration of the CBD. Of course, we have health and human services, the courthouse, town hall, all of these government facilities downtown. and that concentration is above average for a lot of downtowns we've worked in. And in fact, it's that amount of government employment is somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30–40% higher than even downtown Blacksburg. So it's a very, very healthy daytime population, and that's something that we've been waiting. I look back when I was preparing this, when we first did that study in 07, that number was down around, it was around 2,900 daytime population. And that's not a critical mass that attracts retail and services. So that's a very impressive number. The households within 1 mile also have impressive demographics, $70,000 average household income, with $52,000 per household in spending, consumer spending. And I have reports that I've told Andrew I'd share with him, and he can share with you all, that will break that down per sector. We use that to identify sectors that are not represented. In other words, we look for what's not there, and then that's our target market to go after. These numbers, the household income numbers and the spending numbers, are both above the state average and national average. And that, to most people, when I tell them that about downtown Christiansburg, they don't believe me. The perception out there, and I cringe when I read, the dialogue about downtown Christiansburg, needing to be rejuvenated. And I think by the time we get to the end of this, you'll agree with me that we need more space, not really focusing on filling existing space. Most of it's full. There's some challenges. We've got a lot of demand. Our phone is ringing constantly. I'm glad to hear about McAdoo's offices that will satisfy some demand that we can't, because we're basically out of space. Parking is always an issue in every downtown. That is, any downtown you go to, parking is the number one concern. People don't realize that although it's spread along First Street and Commerce Street and back behind Christiansburg Professional Building, we've got a lot of parking. It's just people don't know about it or don't use it or are not aware it's there. Once we get tenant prospects in and start pointing this out, then the conversation changes. However, we're a victim of our own success. We're filling a lot of parking places, and we own right many. The community has expressed desire, and we have worked hand in hand with your staff. The farmers market did the test run on Hickok Street. We donated you some space for storage there, and it's really growing. Public gathering spaces are popular. I think some areas have been identified over next to the Armory that are possible park locations or amphitheater, something of that sort. There's a lot of possibilities downtown to put these types of amenities that bring people downtown. They don't just bring them downtown, but they stay. A major challenge that we see is the Main Street Improvement Project that went on down Franklin and then all the way to the courthouse and all the way up to Rafford Street. Did a great job. It was a wonderful project, but the streets away from that have not had the same treatment. That curb appeal is very, very important as you're touring somebody around. I have toured bankers around downtown Christiansburg. As you can imagine, with the amount of activity we had, I talked to a lot of bankers. And they always look for what's wrong. They never look for what's right. That's their job. And that's always a comment in that facades need to be updated. Some of the street improvements that are in evidence on Main Street need to be expanded to these other streets, especially First Street. Oop, one too many. This is the existing downtown aerial of just the central blocks from the square right here this is labeled First National Bank. It tells you how far back this goes, back in '06 when we started, so '07. And it shows the Commerce Street right here and the parking area back here that is a bit haphazard. Our town square building is right there. And this particular, we focused in on this right after we bought town square. I stood right here, there's a telephone pole right there. And I stood right here and I looked down through here and I thought to myself, what would I do if nothing was there? Not that I would contemplate tearing everything down, it's just a way of my thinking of possibilities. And I felt like there's a very deep drainage ditch right here. I think there's about a 12-foot elevation change right there, so that the parking lots are not connected without Commerce Street. And we felt that a unified parking structure back there would open up a lot of possibilities, which you'll see here in just a couple of slides. The first draft we did, Balzer did it for us in 2009, and that just really laid it out. No topo, no utilities, no nothing. It just, what would it look like if we built a big parking lot back there? So that was the first draft. 2009, of course, was a very challenging year. And it was for us as well as everybody else. So we didn't pursue it for a couple of years. In 2012 is when we started the involvement with the farmers market, and we were talking with Bill Aldridge, and he was heading that up, the building department. And so we kind of took this, Gay and Neal took this idea and got it. This is a bit more engineering involved here, although we still are just showing a building envelope. That's actually that little gap right there was designed for a compactor to be a common waste disposal, with farmers market stalls down Hickok Street. So this was in 2012. In 2014, we got a little bit more serious, and we really started looking at, okay, is this feasible? Because it's one thing to draw it on a piece of paper, there's a whole other thing to build it. And we also knew that we had a lot of issues to deal with regarding what was underground. When we expanded Town Square, we found, even though we had done environmental studies and everything else that you're supposed to do, we found 2 buried tanks, and in fact we found a sewer line, Rick, that was running through the on the back corner of that building without an easement. Nobody really knew it was there. So the town worked very well with us in getting that relocated. But what the real focus here is that this line of this parking lot is not an arbitrary line. We wanted to be able to have 4 loaded quad loaded parking, and at the same time we wanted an area here that would enable building expansions, whether it be, people have mentioned outdoor dining with McAdoo's, or just expanding an existing building as it is out to this line. We built the Town Square addition right to that line, and we did that on purpose. We added about 6,000 square feet to that building, Rick, is that right? That's about right. But we stopped right there with this plan in mind. And we started talking in earnest with town staff as to what we were going to have to deal with. And by the way, I have to take a minute and congratulate you all and all the staff that's here. Randy's been here and seen most of this at least a half a dozen times. Have been absolutely wonderful to work with. We would not be this far along without their assistance. Everybody has been just an absolute pleasure to work with. And when we needed answers, they've gotten them. If they didn't have them, then together with our engineers, we found the answers. This is utility plans for existing utilities that lie back there. We also did title work at our expense on Commerce Street. There was a question as to whether or not Commerce Street was an easement, whether it was a right-of-way, or whether the town owned it. Our attorneys determined, and this was again with the help of the survey division of Gay and Neal, we went all the way back, and the town owns Commerce Street outright. Now, why is that important? If it's a right-of-way and you abandon a right-of-way, you have to offer it to the neighboring property owners. And that can create problems, and it could create problems for what we were contemplating. The fact that the town owns it, and actually there's a little piece of it of Commerce right there that we own, that you use, but that's okay, we won't charge you. That was good news to us. It took a lot of title work to find that out. These are existing sanitary sewer and storm drainage lines. It does not have every water line on it. I have another drawing that has a lot more detail on this. Brad, you're the engineer, you know how much is legible on a screen here. So I went with this one just to give you a sense of the amount of work that has gone in, both town staff and our professional help.
Your homework is impressive.
Oh, I'm not done.
Well, I can't stand it now.
Well, the benefits are this. The existing parking includes 75 to 80 parking places with non-compliant handicap parking. The grade does not meet code. There's about a 3.9% grade from Hickok Street up to Union Bank. As you saw on the drawing, I'm going to go back to this drawing. That gully that's right across here takes up a lot of ground. I don't know how many parking places are right in there. And then we took the liberty of going ahead and restriping the parking lot over here for Christiansburg Professional Building. There is no construction involved with that at all. That is merely a restriping. And that picks up about another 20 to 25 spaces, depending on a couple of things that get into some engineering issues.
And Dr. Jones owns that, is that right?
As best to my knowledge, yes. I believe he still owns it. Is that right, Jared?
It's correct.
Yeah, that's correct. Jared works with his broker as well. We all know each other downtown. We all try to work together because in our mind, whether a new tenant comes to downtown and goes to a competitor's building or one of our buildings, it's a win-win for all of us. Because I keep going back to that daytime population number. I want to see that number. You know, when it hit 5, it's at 5,000 now, and I thought in the back of my mind for a long time that when it hit 5,000 that we were at critical mass. And I still feel that way. So the building envelope for expansion of existing buildings I mentioned, that speaks to the curb appeal of the frontage off of Main Street. It literally, I wish I had a rendering to show, what may happen back there, but we're dealing with a half a dozen property owners here, and I don't want to make assumptions that anyone wants to do what I want to do. This has to be a team thing. So I did not have a rendering done as to what it could look like back there. But we literally have, with the parking facility and that building envelope, we have all sorts of possibilities back there that could be very, very attractive. It also eliminates the little leg of Commerce Street that's one way and those two entrances at the bank, and actually 3 entrances right together at the bank. Commerce Street and 16 North Franklin are all right together, and this cleans up 2 of those. So there's a benefit there. That was the key question. What's it going to cost to do? Now, this is just an excerpt. This was done in 2014. It's an engineer's estimate. You can't read that number down there. I know it by heart. It's $588,000. I really expected to see $1 million on that number. And it's got $100,000 worth of contingencies in it. And we also know that that number probably will go up. I don't think significantly, but when we get into, if we get into digging into these utility issues, like we found surprises behind Town Square, we expect surprises underground. So that's just part of it, but this is a good starting point.
Mr. Alcorn,
Yes.
can we go back to that last slide real quick, a quick question? The last slide, sorry. Bullet number 2, the plan provides approximately 125 spaces. Is that additional?
No,
That's
that is just this facility
Okay.
right
so-
here. It does not count the spaces gained over here.
Okay,
It does not count the spaces here. And by the way, the bank has seen this plan and is on board with this. The grade change right here, any of you that have driven through there ever, is severe. And this project can fix that as well, which they were very interested in.
so 125 nice, tidy, orderly, attractive.
Right there in
parking
that
spaces.
box.
Perfect, okay, thanks. Sorry to distract.
No problem. No, please do. Ask any question that occurs to you. Okay. Then the next question, how can it be financed? And this I don't have answers for. I have ideas, but we have challenges. We have multiple landowners. Every landowner has different goals, and so it's very tough to address it with when you have that many different landowners involved in trying to finance a project that is really an investment in municipal infrastructure. It becomes difficult. What I would call a hard sell. So that's something that that we feel like later on here we may be able to address. Title and easement issues. We met with staff, I think the last in December. Andrew, is that right? I think we met about mid-December, and at that time the manager was trying to work out some issues with the town attorney as to whether you use cross easements, form a condo association type thing for maintenance or whatever, and we were just exploring a lot of opportunities. And to my knowledge, Andrew, you may know if any feedback ever came back on that. I'm not aware of it, if it did, on those issues.
No, I mean, we can touch base with our town attorney
Okay.
tomorrow regarding that, but you know, at this point, it was simply those conversations are the best way to move forward.
Right, right. Well, we were trying to get all the issues on the table. Again, this is just part of the background homework that goes into any development project. And then there's ongoing maintenance responsibilities. How's that handled? What portion is this municipal? What portion is private? All of those questions wind up being topics for discussion, and I would imagine a lot. However, I don't think they're insurmountable. In the meantime, you guys were not standing still, and we kept an eye on you as well. You did the UDA study, the urban development areas for the comp plan, 2015-2016, and I think the final copy is dated October 16. And that is a 20-year vision, and I know this is small. I've got some slides. The next slide is blown up a little bit. And it shows different phases, and I'm sure you all have seen it, and because you had to approve it, and I'm sure you read every word of the comp plan before you approved it. Really? You didn't? But this really shows infill construction downtown. This is phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. This document's on your website. It's a great document. It has some wonderful information in it. It had some things in it that we weren't aware of. And as you can see, kind of in that phase 4 down here, this center of town is completely built up. Interestingly, they did not address the properties on West Main Street. I promise I didn't tell them not to, but for some reason they left those alone. This is a phase 1, and the block that we've been looking at is right here. And this contemplates building out on Commerce Street, some buildings. And it's really kind of ambiguous as to how all of this is to be serviced. There's some parking structures and whatnot that are proposed. And of course, no cost data is given. But it's a vision, and that's we have to start with that type of thinking. And I commend the town for doing this work. This was a conceptual out of the plan, actually on the bottom of that same page. What caught my eye was that right there, hotel. And the reason is because, of course, we're in the hotel business as well. But that is looking north. I don't think you can look north on Commerce. I think they got a little bit mixed up. But Main and Hickok is right about there. So that's going to go into the next slide. That kind of dovetail with some other planning we had done in 2009. We had actually looked at the corner of Main and Hickok and thought that is a prime spot for a multi-story development. The top there, and I've got some close-ups of it in the next slide, that's the Main Street elevation, and that's the Hickok Street elevation. We went as far as schematic plans. This was all done by Glenn Reynolds from Blacksburg, an architect that I've worked with for 30 years, the town's worked with for many, many years. And we just sort of generically said the bottom of this would probably be retail. The second and third floor, second could be office, could be residential. Third floor, we did lay out as residential for downtown housing. Now, there's some issues with downtown housing that I'll address in a moment. The next slide, I believe, gives you the rear elevation that would face Commerce Street. And again, this is designed and built, designed to be built to that building envelope that I showed you on the slide previous. It fits within there. This part of the building right here is actually structured parking because this is a 45,000 square foot building and would require about 112 to 150 spaces depending on the use that goes in it. Depends on how much residential, how much retail. But we knew that we were going to have to provide additional parking as well, even with if the larger facility was built behind or along Commerce Street. So this plan, again, was done in 2009. At the end of 2009, we put it on the shelf. The economy was not in any type of shape. The market was not in any kind of shape for us to make this type of investment. But we still feel it's a viable project. And again, it comes back to those demographic numbers that I showed you earlier. So that's our vision for the corner of Main and Hickok. Whoops. That again is close up of the Hickok Street elevation. Now, in December, we were also told about the storm drain, new storm drainage, which would come right through the center of that site and would preclude us building that building. There are alternatives to come down Hickok. I understand that there's a significant cost increase over this. This is the most direct and dollar cheapest is what Wayne Nelson told us, and I don't argue with that. It's just simply that given the vision of the UDA, given the potential of that particular corner, I think that some thought ought to be put into an alternative that uses Hickok rather than through the center of this, what I consider a prime building site. And I put that on we're going to continue to work with you no matter what. I mean, that goes without saying.
Can we stop there for just
Sure.
a second, Randy? So that the last slide again, that storm drain, I thought,
We have a grant that's scheduled for fiscal year 19. It's over $1 million project.
for this very project.
Yes.
Okay, I knew that I wasn't sure where we were at with that, but I thought that was, okay, so this is a current plan, and are the plans done for it and everything?
They are, to be honest, I'm not sure whether it's full design or not, but I know they have at least preliminary design.
Okay,
As far as relocating it, I guess that still would be a possibility.
right.
I know we've mentioned the possibility of closing Hickok Street, and if we were to do that, then I think we could revisit the possibility of relocating the storm drain.
Great conversations to have.
Would that, if we were to consider closing Hickok Street, would that hurt your development at all?
No, not at all. Not at all. Well, let me qualify that. With a municipal parking structure behind the Main Street buildings, then closing Hickok would have minimal impact. Without that, then, to be quite frank, without that parking, some type of unified parking structure back there, the feasibility of what I just showed you becomes questionable. Simply from an access standpoint, parking standpoint, all of those things. These things have to work together,
Certainly.
which is exactly why we're here tonight. Any other questions?
So you're basically talking from Hickok to the bank,
Yes.
okay?
Yes, and I'll back up to that slide.
Okay, okay.
The farmer's market work that you all did back in late 2016, that's the overview of the area, the study area, and I didn't excerpt all of the drawings. We like this one, just from a standpoint of access and a pedestrian mall, and again, cutting off the corner of this building as it is, that may cause us some problem. It may cause our tenants some problem. But we realize that these are concepts, and there were 3 options in the farmer's market where the local foods work that was done. And quite frankly, closing Hickok and building, I think it showed, I don't have that rendering in this deck, but I think it showed a permanent building right here. But of course, we still need to access this parking. Whatever you do with Hickok, even if you turn that into a pedestrian mall, you're going to have parking. And if these businesses downtown are going to survive, they have to have parking. And it needs to be accessible, it needs to be neat, it needs to be clean to attract the type of businesses that we want downtown.
If we considered closing it back to, say, Commerce Street and leave Commerce Street open, does that help any?
Well, the facility that I showed you incorporates Commerce Street,
Okay.
but the access is preserved all the way to Franklin. So if you closed it down to where the present Commerce Street is, then yes, that would preserve the access back to Franklin. And more importantly, it preserves the access back into these businesses back here. So there's a lot of options here. And we're open-minded, and we want to work with you in developing the best option.
I probably missed it, but you already own Morgan Griffin's office and all that area?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the Main Hickok property.
Okay.
And then the 16 North property is also involved in that redevelopment. So 3 of our properties are involved in that. But we feel that the farmer's market is an automatic draw for downtown. And again, it gets into that, especially this pavilion right here. Whether that pavilion is there, whether it's there, or whether it's over next to the armory, wherever it is, that generates that nighttime traffic that the daytime people will hang around for. And that's what generates our tenant prospects' interest in downtown, is do you have the people? That's what everybody wants to know. Do you have the people? So the critical question again becomes how to finance these projects. You all heard a presentation on using a community development authority with the Laurel Plaza project That's actually an avenue that, on our list of possibilities for finance options that we developed a few years ago. I've read through all of the legalese with that, and my understanding from Randy and Andrew is that the attorney is reviewing all of these things, pulling case studies and things, and how a CDA may work. And Mayor, you've made the statement that it may be something that's good to have in the arsenal. And I think you told me you didn't want to use it for small projects, you want to use it for big projects.
Well, I think that's the general concept.
And I agree. So I think, our position would be to pursue that. And, if there are roadblocks, then can we go over, around, or under them, or whatever, if that's the best avenue. There are other funding sources out there. I've got reams of information regarding state monies, grant monies, facade monies, all sorts of things that can be done away from a CDA. You don't need a CDA to do it. There is a way to put this together, but it's going to take the town's involvement. The CDA has the advantage of having a funding mechanism built into it that does not impact the town's balance sheet. And so I think that's why that's moved to number 1 on the list.
And that basically is creating a special tax district.
Yes.
Where you have additional taxes assessed against the people that are within that.
Correct. It can also be combined with tax abatements. And I think that may be appropriate in dealing with the different landowners in the properties affected. And none of it, I think the CDA is designed to last for 50 years. The abatements may be 10 of that. My understanding, and I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on the internet, my understanding is that there's a great deal of flexibility within the CDA structure in order to make projects like this happen. So that's pretty much what all I have. I hope I've proved the case to you that we have a very healthy business community downtown, and it's poised for more growth. We need space. We need all of the improvements that both the comp plan contemplates, the ideas that we've brought to the table, and we believe that critical mass is there and that the time is now. And that's all I have. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Is that it?
That's it.
There have been 3, as you're doing this, and it's a fantastic wealth of information in this presentation. So whatever happens from here forward, this is very impressive, and you're clearly a key stakeholder down here and partner
Oh, yeah.
in whatever we might get into. 3 places I've been recently, as I'm mulling your plan for behind, the properties here. Culpeper, definitely Winchester, Virginia, and then of course a little further away, but Charleston, South Carolina. 3 places I've been recently that stand out in my mind as being very welcoming to the downtown because they have these pockets of free public parking that welcomes you. It's well marked. It says,
Exactly.
"We're glad you're here," and you pull in. It's well lit. And it's just, those are 3 that stand out. Charleston is above everything. But, so many places when you go downtown, there's not, it's hard to find that. But those are 3 communities. So I can, just speaking for myself, I think that's much needed down there to have a welcoming, clean, orderly place just for people to feel, oh yeah, we're going downtown. Because every time I pull in behind McAdoo's or go to, you wonder if I can park here.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all, it's a goat rodeo as far as what's going on back there. Some of it's posted, some of it's not. But simply put, I understand what you're saying about that, and I'm thinking of communities that, and Winchester is really nice too. You drive through that, you don't have to go too far, and they have pockets of that. Say here, public parking right here. So you get out of your car and lickety split, you're on your feet.
Mm-hmm.
Downtown Salem has done the same thing.
Yeah, Salem's
Behind
a
their
good
main
example,
street,
yeah.
they have a public parking facility that, I don't know the structure they used to acquire that, or whether they even, I don't know how that's put together. But downtown Salem had a terrible parking problem. And that lot took the pressure off. We owned the College and Main building right there on the corner of College and Main. And it had its own parking, a little gated thing beside another McAdoo's. And the public parking back behind that drove the 100% occupancy up and down Main Street. Now, Main Street Salem's going through some changes right now and some redevelopment, very similar to what we've done here in the last 6 or 7 years. Because things change. But that parking facility is there, and it's permanent, and it is probably, in my opinion, as a developer and building owner, that's one of the greatest assets downtown Salem has.
Is this the one where the farmer's market is?
It's actually up the hill from the farmer's market. It's in behind the buildings from that block.
From the college.
Okay.
College.
Right across from Roanoke College on Clay Street. It's accessed from Clay Street, which is a street kind of like our first street. It's not as wide, but it parallels Main. And I don't know, do you know how many spaces are in that thing?
No, I do not.
I don't either. I know we own 21. Numbers like that stick in my head.
And one question, have you checked the temperature of the various property owners? Obviously, you've done all your other homework. I'm sure you could tell us exactly what the general sentiment is from property owners.
We have one here.
Yeah, well,
I'm sure he'd be glad to
Yeah.
share with you. Yes, we have talked, and varying degrees of interest, but it all comes down to, okay, who pays? That's
Okay,
what it
well,
comes
take the
down
dollar,
to.
take the dollars off, just talk about the land use itself.
Yeah.
The use of that land for a unified, something that benefits everybody. Does everyone see such a thing as in their best interest to
I wouldn't
allow
use,
the
I
land
wouldn't
use?
use the word everyone.
Okay.
I would use the word most.
Okay.
But I think, the reticence on some parties is well placed. It's who pays. How is this funded? This is a huge project, and it's going to be a major change for downtown. And so, rightly so, people that have investments are going to be a little bit leery at first, and until these questions get answered. I respect that.
Well, if you had, again, take the dollars out of it and say, in order to do a project like this, what I would say, if there's any public money involved, taxpayer dollars, then there would have to be some sort of a permanent easement of some sort if we're involved,
Exactly. That
to
was the
make sure
issue.
that there's continued use of that.
That was the issues where we kind of left this in December.
Right.
And we're looking into those issues and how to structure that.
Yes, because if you didn't have an easement and the town goes in and participates to some extent, some percentage, whether it's 1% or 100% or whatever it might be, and then the property changes hands and they say, you know what, I'm not interested in this at all. I'm going to build me a big building and it's going to go right back to the limits of my property.
Well, no, that has to be addressed so that can happen.
Okay, but the land, so you have a land use discussion, and then you have the dollars discussion. And then, of course, you have maintenance discussion.
And you've got feasibility issues, building one big building all the way back to Commerce Street where you're going to park it.
Yeah.
Unless you go back to the UDA plan and build structured parking. And structured parking right now is running about $40,000 per space. Wow. It's very expensive. Surface parking, less than 20. So, I wish that I could leave the numbers alone and say, besides the money, but the money is everything. It really is the funding, and I don't think, I don't think any of us included as property owners, would go into this blindly without these questions being answered and without there being a plan that is far enough into the future that we can make investment decisions based on it. That's the key right now. And that's what I encourage you to do, to continue to work, researching the CDA. You know, we've gone about as far as we can go in design work, you know, identifying the issues. We're so fortunate to have an engineering firm like Gay and Neal, an architect like Glenn Reynolds, that can look at this and say, you got a problem here. And we're also very fortunate to have a town staff that knows what's there already. And, you know, you've got a lot of long-term people that remember things that are in the ground that are not on the drawings. And that's very helpful. So again, I commend council, I commend town staff. We have thoroughly enjoyed working together. And but it's to the point, we've gone about as far as we can go. And I don't want to be in a position to where anyone thinks we're trying to shove this down anyone's throat. We can't do it by ourselves. You know, short of buying every building on that block, then you know, it's just not feasible for one developer or one property owner to do this.
Now go over exactly what do you want the town to do for you to start?
Help us, well,
The parking.
continue the work that's going on. I don't know where the attorney is with the various alternatives for permanent easements or the maintenance issues and how that's developed. The study with the CDA. I think that if there's any one thing that you're not doing, is exploring the state funding mechanisms. I've had conversations with Delegate Nick Rush, and he's on the House Appropriations Committee. He has encouraged me to present this to you all, and he is absolutely gung-ho to help with anything that he can do at the state level. And there are lots and lots of funds available in different agencies spread across economic development, Appalachian Regional Commission, the planning district. I mean, it's just, the list goes on and on and on. Nick and I sat in Town Square one night for about 3 hours talking about all the different agencies and all the different funding that he sees go through appropriations. And I say, Nick, why can't we get that in downtown Christiansburg? He says, we need a plan.
But now the 600,000, I believe it's 600,000 for the parking lot. That is one of the things that you're looking for.
Asking you for tonight? No, sir.
No, it's not.
No, sir. No. That's a benchmark in order to just give everybody an idea of the type of numbers we're looking at.
Okay.
To put that together with the storm drainage, then, I mean, we could easily be at a $2 million level to do this, to do it all. You add the farmer's market and the pavilion into that. I don't know if any costing's been done on that.
Probably in the 800,000 range.
800, so we're at 3 million.
Basically redo the street and.
But I'll be honest with you, 3 million in the grand scheme of things, if you look at your tax base downtown, is peanuts. Now, that's probably an exaggeration, but, you know, $3 million, especially at rates today, is as close to free money you can get with these rates. But depending on the funding mechanisms that are brought together, I believe with a high degree of certainty that we can structure the improvements in such a way that everybody can handle however the structure winds up being. You know, we've got farmers market, we've got storm drainage, we've got a parking facility, and we're also creating a new space for additional building envelope, possibly developing the first of what the UDA envisions as building up instead of out, because that's basically, if you sum up the UDA plan in a nutshell, that's what they're recommending, is build up, not out. And just about every downtown has found that to be true. But it starts with a plan and being able to put the right elements in place to make those things happen.
And you're looking forward to hear from the town in how long a time?
Monday would be good.
I hear you. I hear you.
Well, Steve, we've been at this for 10 years. We're patient.
So a couple more days is not gonna bother you?
Yeah, we're not going anywhere.
All right.
Do you have a question?
Actually, I just want to make a statement. We heard a little inkling of this a few months ago, which raised my interest. And of course, it sort of got quiet, so I'm happy you're here.
Well, I
To let us
appreciate you
know. I think
inviting
this is
us.
the first step.
I think it's
But
probably.
I'd like to know, Mr. Poffs here, what's your initial feelings on this?
I think it's definitely the parking would improve the area. Again, we gotta get over the hump of the financing, the ownership, the maintenance, all those things that's been mentioned. As how to make that happen.
And you believe that the town, you mentioned how great the town staff is, and I would wholeheartedly agree with that, but for us to start to facilitate that as soon as possible, just to get the ball rolling. I mean, that's what I'm
The
hearing.
financing questions, that's what needs to be facilitated at this point.
Mhm. And the easements
You
and
know,
who's on board.
if you want to go deeper into the engineering issues, then that's going to take town involvement.
Mhm.
Again, we've gone just about as far as we can dealing with other people's property and public infrastructure as private developers. So, you could do that on parallel tracks to be able to bring all these projects together and get a total cost. And I think you'll find from what I've read, and I'm by no means an expert, but from what I've read, I think you'll find that there is funding available that will make this all feasible. $3 million in the grand scheme of the government budgets is very doable.
Well, I think for myself, this is probably one of the most interesting and probably most encouraging presentations that I've heard in 17 years sitting on council and as the mayor. I mean, it's people keep beating us to death that downtown is dead. Well, it's really not.
No, it's not dead. And I'm here to if I've done nothing but change that dialogue, I've done my job.
And Mr. Poff came a few years ago talking about parking and his building downtown. But this is great. I mean, we rarely hear from owners downtown. We always sort of hear through the grapevine or this. So I'm excited.
Good.
And I would like to know, and I'm sure other council has some questions, but what direction from us do you need, Randy?
I think we probably need to get the central business committee together and probably need to get input from groups like CBAC, DCI, property owners. We need to get everybody together.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a call into Nick now, Nick Rush,
Okay.
and discuss financing. It's a lot of discussions that need to be had.
Well, I consider this Central Business District Committee meeting. I mean, Sam and I are here, and I actually think it's even more than that because we have a majority of council here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't see much more discussion that Sam and I can have by delaying this thing a couple more weeks. We've got all council here. I'd like to start finding out options that you can officially present to us as a group that we can take advantage of, especially with this drainage. If there has to be some rerouting of that for the 2019, everything has to start right now. What do you guys think? I mean,
Well, I don't usually like to speak for other council members, but knowing the other two, I will tonight. I'm certain that if they were here, they would have the same sentiments that you're hearing being expressed tonight. I'm going to come back. I'm an engineer. I'm sort of logical minded.
I was counting on you being here.
Well, it's a detriment a lot of times because I'm not very creative. But to me, the ideas are fantastic, okay? It does come down to my mind, again, back to land use as a starting point to say, because if we do a project back here and we do it together, I cannot imagine the circumstances under which this council, or I'll speak for myself, I can't imagine the circumstances that we're gonna use eminent domain for anything. So you, plural, as the business community, we can play a role with it, but there needs to be some consensus of what's okay with people to do on that property back here. What are the parameters? What do we really have to work with back here that we don't have to, use a big stick to do it, that it actually is. And so when you say most people are on board and stuff, is there any chance of this being a unified decision?
In my opinion, it has to be a unified.
Right? That gets us started over to, okay, making it real.
Yeah, well, and again, it gets, as Bob and I both have said, we need these financing questions answered. We need the ownership structure, easement, whatever it may be. We need that. We need answers now.
Okay.
I've again, it's to the point, we've gone as far as we can go. We are more than happy to share all, and what I've given you here is maybe 10% of the data that we've produced. We have done an incredible amount of work, as well as town staff, and we've done our best to pull it together here into a coherent presentation to show you that it seems to be feasible. Again, if there's a cavern under that parking lot, we've got a problem, So borings need to take place. You're talking about a 4% grade that needs to be brought down to about 2.5% to 3%, which is very doable. We haven't done a grading plan. That needs to be done. But again, these are all things in my mind that without having some idea of financing mechanism would be wasted time and effort. Because I believe we're to the point of establishing that we have a viable project. I cannot tell you with certainty it is feasible. There's a difference, as you're well aware.
Okay, I get it.
I've heard over the years that there's a stream under there somewhere, but I
Oh,
think
there
it's,
is.
it's down a little bit though, isn't it?
Oh no, it runs straight under two of those buildings.
It runs under Taysom.
And that's what the drainage project is.
Okay,
You know.
okay, that's correct.
Yeah, and in fact, way back in, I think it was around 2011, we had Gay and Neal contact the Corps of Engineers about piping that stream. And the Corps, we didn't get it official because we couldn't speak for all of the property owners. But the Corps basically was okay with it. They said, yeah, great. That's what needs to happen. The fact that the storm drainage project is routed right through the center of the building site, I did a really good job of, I thought, staying in my seat when I saw the drawing, because I knew what the ramifications were going to be. But I also knew, in working with staff, what they were faced with, the grant monies, the time frame, and trying to get this done, And I haven't said this, but I will, and you'll think I'm brown-nosing, and I guess I probably am. One of the biggest advantages we have is that Christiansburg, in our experience, and in my 60 years in and out of this town and living here for as many as I did, 20 years, Christiansburg has just a can-do attitude. And you find ways to do projects efficiently, affordably, and it's very rare that you see just total neighborhood uprisings in objection, because most of the time you take the time to listen up front and address those. And I think that's probably, if not the greatest advantage, it's certainly in the top 5 because of how you do business. It's one of the reasons that attracted us to the Central Business District. We knew that we had a government that would work with us in solving problems. And that's really, when you buy old buildings, and Bob can tell you this too, you've got to have a little bit of leeway in some places, and you've got to have some help in getting some things done that are not in the ordinances. They're not in the code books. It's just stuff you run into. And dealing with you guys is a rose garden compared to a lot of the municipalities that we have done work in. So I commend you.
We've got the same, this stream running through downtown is very common.
Yeah.
Blacksburg has the same thing. Strubles Creek runs right through under the Mill Restaurant, College Avenue, Newman Library, the drill field. In the
On
late-
Main Street, I built a building over top of
Yeah,
that creek.
in the late 1980s, in the late 80s, that flooded in Surcharge and flooded Donaldson Brown.
Yeah, sure did.
And so the town had to go up to Owens Park. And Owens Park, a lot of people don't know that, but it's basically a large stormwater pond that, to slow down the peaks. So it's excellent to have this discussion now, because that's something we can avoid, or that's something we can do to avoid a constraint for such a project as this.
I think that's a good point. I'll just piggyback on that comment real quick, that I know that we do have we've been funded for a downtown stormwater study that will start to look at, where could there be upstream relief.
Detention,
areas. Yeah, detention, so that we are in a position to talk to property owners, about redeveloping sites, because it's gonna continue to be an issue with redevelopment downtown, until we really have a good handle on drainage. And we have a project that's already funded for the east side of North Franklin Street. And so that's moving forward. But this study, I think, will really help. And then there'll be some really, challenging conversations to have as far as, where, if we're gonna reroute this, where do we reroute it, and what is that, what does that cost and time frame and such. But I do think that just the overall downtown stormwater study will really help with looking at what water's coming into downtown, and how could we possibly look upstream to see to detain it, so we're having less volume come through at any one time. And so I think that's one of those topics. I think we really will be pushing along on the CDA conversation. We can talk to Teresa on that, as well as looking at shared parking. I think the time is right to just move all these subjects forward, and continue to talk with all property owners to get them on board. And I think staff it will be a concerted effort, and I think reaching out to Delegate Rush is great as well. Randy and I attended a Main Street conference last year, and we had a representative from DHCD here in December. She toured around and was really excited about a bunch of projects we pointed out. And so we really weren't in a position to apply for a lot of those funding sources this past year, because most of them are in January and February. But we will be in a position to apply for them next year, as well as the Appalachian Regional Commission. Their funding deadline's actually in the fall, so we do need to give that a hard look and to see what's available.
I think you hit the key point that I failed to bring together. It's just to bring all of these projects together, and let's look at it as a whole. Because what we're really talking about is the next 50 to 100 years. So whatever that cost figure is, spread it out over that timeline, and then you start to realize this is something that can really happen. But we need, all of these pieces need to fit.
Now, Randy, we can't vote on during a work session, but do you think that we could, it would be likely to put this on the agenda for next Tuesday? To vote on that possibly?
I don't think we vote on anything on Tuesday, other than giving staff a clear direction on where we want to go.
That's what I would think, yeah.
But we can do that. We can do that here as a majority.
We can do that right now?
As a
I'll
majority.
take the 600,000 on
Yeah,
Decent person.
Yeah, like everything Brad said, but I would like, I mean, it's up to the majority of us here, whether we want Randy and Andrew to start exploring this, open a conversation with the other building owners. And I'd like to get a report on Tuesday. I don't think we need to add it to the agenda, but I think that should be part of your report on your progress. And then I would even go as far to say we probably need to meet again in July. Once you have spoken with all the property owners, Randy, and address some of the concerns, and then report it back to us, and then I would like to just, as fast as possible, see where we're going with it.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't going to skip anything, but we need everybody on board.
Now, Andrew, I don't think that you have time to do it, but you could maybe start looking on some of the agreements, with the state and funding and things of that nature. Can we have that much time to look at that, see if some doors that are open?
Kevin can look at.
We can look into it a little.
Okay.
Don't know if we have solid answers.
I think Randy can assign people to look at that.
Well, that's what I was talking to Andrew, thank you.
Is that anything that regional commission can get on board with? Or
Kevin Bird, they could advise us on
They
that.
could jump all over that for funding application probably. And
I have spoken with Kevin, and in concept, without him seeing all of the details. And yes, there are opportunities there as well.
well, it could even be getting Kevin, Mr. Rush, and some of us, or some of the staff together anyway, to talk about what tools do we have in our toolbox here to make this thing get wings. But what you've done here is presented some very specific opportunities. And I think we would all like to see some big things happen downtown, but you presented something very specific here, which is what's needed. Like you said, a vision. Probably need, when we had the UDA thing. But this is getting a good conversation started with some specifics. Not just, well, we need to do this or something, we need to improve parking, or we need to do this. But your ideas are backed up with some pretty impressive numbers that I had no idea what I saw tonight. Honestly, I had no idea that we got that kind of occupancy, that kind of activity. And you're right, success begets, or investment. If you build these things, they will,
Well,
build on itself.
the core was here. The core was here in '07 when
Yeah.
we started, and we knew that. And that's our business, is to be able to look at potential. And, it's what keeps developers awake at night. if you're right. And as you can tell by the dates of our acquisitions, we took a measured pace. We felt like that we were right over the long run, but with the recession lasting as long as it did, we didn't hit our occupancy targets for probably 2 years later than we had projected. But fortunately, we had not overextended ourselves, and we were able to ride that out. But now we're to a point where, it's renovating more buildings is not going to create the progress that I see is laying there waiting to be tapped into. And I believe this is in the spirit of the comp plan. It doesn't preclude, say, the development that was on that little horseshoe around Commerce Street there. It doesn't preclude that. But it is a step in that direction. And I read the comp plan section several times to make sure that we wouldn't have conflicts there. As some of you know, I spent 12 years on Montgomery County Planning Commission, and the comp plan issues can stop things cold. So again, we've done everything we know to do so far. We are happy to meet with any group, subgroup. I'd be glad to make the presentation to a group of the property owners. They have Nobody has seen this in this form. I literally put this PowerPoint together today. So, you know, if there's other information that you feel needs to be included, just let me know, and if I have it, it's yours.
Mr. Alcorn, I would like to thank you for bringing this to my eyes, because once again, you know, when I walk downtown and drive downtown, I'm thinking there needs to be more down here, but to hear you, there is a lot down there that we just don't see. And I guess I'm thinking back in my younger days when you had more, I guess, retail spaces down there.
Oh, yeah.
And when I ran for town council, that was my platform, was to help bring more retails. But I think with what you just showed us tonight, that we're in the right direction.
Yes, I agree. And retail actually is the biggest shortage.
Yeah.
You know, we have about 4,000 feet available for office space in town square. None of that really is suitable for retail. The real mix of businesses, retail, restaurants, entertainment, all of those things, they follow a logical progression. And I promised you I was going to talk about downtown housing, but I went on too long. Downtown housing is something that, according to our numbers, is not quite feasible yet. But we believe that within about a 5-year time frame, that would also be something that we could look at. It just comes down to a cost issue and the average rents. The average rents in Christiansburg are $800 and below, and it takes average rents around $1,000, $1,200 to make that work.
So, I mean, so how do you see retails downtown? I mean, is it, of course, it's doable, but town
Well, the
front.
question is, where are you going to put it? Are you going to tear
Okay.
something down, or
Okay.
do you want to build or facilitate
Mhm.
a retail front facing a brand new parking lot
Mhm.
that makes it very easy for people to park, shop, dine, all of those things? So I look at it, sort of turned it inside out and said, all the backs of these buildings here can be improved, and storefront or dining or whatever that property owner may have. I don't, you know, assume to know what anybody would want to do, but I would like to be able to give the opportunity of that building envelope back there. I think that opportunity alone will generate the interest from everybody. I know that our tenant prospects look at these same demographics as we do, and even drill down into their customer profiles and how many live within 1 mile. And downtowns really are constrained by about a 1 mile ring. You'll hear other developers talk about 3 mile rings, 5 mile rings, or trade areas like Marketplace. And that's suitable for that. But for a downtown, that 1 mile ring is key. That household income number of $70,000 is $20,000 above national average. The spending number, 52, is actually the national household income average. So retailers see that and say, where can we go? And we, you know, right now we have really no options. So this type of discussion to bring all of these things together. The farmers market, I think, is a very important component of this. And obviously the drainage issues. We want that creek out from under the buildings as much as anybody. But when you start looking at all of these pieces as a whole, then I think we get a good idea of what can be.
What's impressive about the beginning of your presentation is that your investment has been sustained. You know, you've continued to do that, and I understand and respect the fact that for every dollar you invest, you'd like to get 3 or 4 or 5 back, and I'm all for it. I hope we get 10 back, because that means everybody's winning.
Exactly.
That's, I guess, you found a stake in the ground with us, and we need to figure out, what we're going to do next. But I'm very excited about what I heard here this evening.
Well, I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for inviting us.
I'll try not to pull the trigger on you quite as quick as you did the last time, but that's okay.
No, it was, even though it was short notice, and the thought did cross my mind is, boy, I'd like to have a week to prepare. And I thought, no, opportunity knocks, but it doesn't often knock twice. And so I thought that I would take the opportunity as it was given. I'm glad we had that conversation, and I'm looking forward to working with you. We all are.
I got Mr. Paul from Mr. Alcorn. I mean, would it be easier, I mean, you mentioned about getting the property owners, can we get them together here? Maybe send out an invitation? How many are there? You got Union Bank, the doctor who owns on the other side, and then Casey Newell, right?
And Bob and your group.
Yes,
The
so there's
man's-
three of us. and we'll
Would it
come
be
on.
easier just to,
And McAdoo's were the property they bought to Charlie's Chinese.
It's a small crowd.
Right.
We can fit in the conference room.
right, I mean, would you be open to that, to get everybody together?
Yeah, I'm open to meeting.
Are you excited about this, Bob? What are your feelings on this? Is that something?
Well, Ray and I've had conversations in the past, it's the money issue
Okay.
and as far as anything, and he's talking about financing, and I'm not sure my partners and I are willing to pay for that.
Right.
Bob has questions I can't answer, and
Sure.
rightly so. That's as open as I can be.
And that's where we're at on it.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
Financially, we didn't see, because we have no plans to build in back Old Town Mall, but now this comes to fact, we may.
Right, but that's what it requires, some
Right.
candid conversations. And
Ray is a visionary, and I'm just managed with
You just ready to retire, aren't you?
that. I'm ready to retire, you got that.
I have your counterpart in my brother. Rick is the one that handles all of our construction and renovations, and I can't tell you how many times I've come in with a project or a building, and he's just looked at it and rolled his eyes and said, please don't do that, please don't do that. Yeah.
All right. Is there any other comments or questions? Right. Again, thank you all very much
You're
for the
very welcome.
presentation, and I believe we have it on film, and you're probably going to leave the PowerPoint with us if we need to, for future reference.
I will send a copy.
That's fine. I mean, I think that some of our guys may have some questions, and it's kind of a refresher, but Randy and I had discussed the benefits of having this thing taped, so for future references and for, to talk about in the future, so.
The only thing on that presentation that, I don't want people to get the wrong idea about is that Main and Hickok building. That is purely speculation at this point. It depends on that parking lot project. It may never happen. If the parking lot project doesn't happen, it doesn't make that feasible. So I would not want to get anybody excited about that particular building being proposed here tonight, because I'm not proposing that building tonight. I'm telling you that we have been through the thought process. We've also been through the thought process with every one of our properties. And there's a lot of information, because it didn't pertain to this particular block, that I haven't shared with you, that is also exciting in growth for Christiansburg. So,
Very good. Anything else, guys? Again, thank you.
you're very welcome.
So, very interesting evening. We are adjourned. Thank you guys for your time. I'm glad we decided to do this.